Hey, what is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to another episode of Gentleman Pursuits podcast. My name is Ryan. How is everyone doing? Actually, to be honest, this feels kind of weird because I literally just did an interview before the recording of this, and doing the whole introduction again within a short period of time seems kind of like a little bit funny to me. But nonetheless, remember, I hope you guys are staying healthy, staying in, because we're still in COVID time. Don't let your guard down. This is not the end yet. We still have to stay inside, social distancing, wear your mask. But also, when you're staying at home, remember to stay hydrated. Drink that water. It's important. It's the healthiest thing you can do to yourself. Drink that water. So, just want to use this opportunity to say that exam season's coming for myself. And so please forgive me for the lack of Instagram posts. I'll try my best to catch up after. And also just a reminder, there will be a Christmas special episode with a few old time guests. So stay tuned for that. So without further delay, let's introduce today's episode's guest. To be honest, without the rapidly growing interest in vintage watches for myself, this episode probably wouldn't happen. But because now I'm so into it, please welcome Mr. Alvise Mori from Vintage Watches Archive on Instagram. How are you doing, Alvise?
Thank you for having me here, Ryan. I'm doing well, thank you. And actually, as you mentioned it, I am coming out right now of the exam season, let's say, because I submitted my master thesis yesterday.
Yes.
So now being here is like a breath of fresh air from everything I had to go through in the last say, 2 months of crazy work in order to finish everything in time.
Right. Because remember I said like how it's like an interesting thing, because one of my good friend, his name is Andrew, which I recently interviewed. We talked about like design of watches. He is getting his master in architecture.
Okay.
Yes, and
so
I've known, I've known quite a few people that are into watches that are also architect, and that's like.
I think that the two worlds are, let's say, connected in a way, or better to say, the world of design is what ties together architecture and watches, because of course aesthetics are a fundamental part both of architecture and of watch design. So. Yeah,
that is true.
It seems logical to me that there are common interests in the two areas from several people.
What's your favorite style of architectures?
Whoa, this is a tough question. I think I really like mid-century design from the US mainly. And by mid-century design, I refer both to architecture and to furniture design and product design at large. So wow. I like a lot all the case study houses that were built in California throughout the 50s and the 60s. Yes. I like a lot all those furniture pieces from the same era, and they can be both from the US or from Europe. And Italy in particular had quite a few prolific designers. Think of Gio Ponti, think of Marco Zanuso, of Franco Albini. There were many great designers that have been able to create designs that are still very, very contemporary, even after almost 70 years. And I think that's how you can say good design is good, because it is absolutely timeless and eternal.
Yes, I love how you made the connection between like, I love how you said that basically all design aspects, no matter like you're designing furniture, clothes, buildings, they all kind of consist of similar ideas, because it's just literally putting your vision into reality. And what like that immediately, immediately thought of, do you know the designer Rick Owens?
Yes, I've heard of him.
So basically his main source of inspiration is from furnitures, like brutalist furnitures, something like that. So I was like, damn, that's right. Like coming from, someone that is studying architecture, you just validated some of my I'd say, beliefs or something like that. So let's start the episode off strong by a must-ask question. What is your vintage watch grail? What is that one piece that you really want to get?
Well, let me say that I don't know if I can say this, but Ryan has sent me all the questions that he wanted to ask me in this interview, and they were rather easy to answer. I had to think a little bit, but they were easy, except for the first one. The first one is a question that I get asked a lot of times, and it's always very hard to answer. However, let's say that I don't think I have one single grail piece. It depends, my answer depends on what kind of watches I'm into in that week, that month, that day, say how you want. But in this precise moment, I think I might answer the first of the three Patek Philippe 3449 perpetual calendars, which are a rather unknown, I would say, reference from the Maison. It was created at the end of the 40s, when Patek was trying to shift from its old traditional designs, let's say, in terms of perpetual calendars, to something more contemporary and more at pace with the times in terms of design. And the 3449 was a hand-wound reference, cased only in yellow gold, with three slightly different cases, which were all manufactured by the same case makers. And it served as a test reference for what ended up being the reference 3448, so the well-known automatic perpetual calendar, which was also Patek's first automatic perpetual calendar. The three pieces currently reside, the third made in the Patek Museum, and the first two in private collections around the world. One is in John Goldberger's collection here in Italy, and the second one, I don't know.
Damn.
And I love that piece because it has, first of all, great aesthetics, which are maybe what I value the most in every watch. Not only in terms
what's the reference again?
3449. And it's funny because the test reference, let's say, was called 3449. And then it went into production with a lower number, which is 3448. And it later became the reference 3450 when the leap year indicator was added in the 60s.
Oh my God, this looks absolutely gorgeous. What the? Damn.
And yeah, you can find, of course, the lines that would end up in the 3448, but I really like the lugs, which are a little bit longer and wider. And I don't know, maybe they give a little more character to the watch.
Yes. The lugs are pretty old school. Like there's a huge gap between the strap and the case itself.
Yes, and that's a detail that many people don't like, not only about this specific watch, but about watches in general. And I instead like quite a lot the fact that the strap is not really tight, really close to the case.
Well, I feel like I myself, I have to be honest, I myself don't quite like lugs like that, because not because it doesn't look good. I think if you hand me a piece and that's the lug design, I would love it. But because my wrist is really thin, if the case is big and the lugs are larger, it's going to go over my wrist.
Yes,
so it wouldn't look nice on my wrist.
That's true. Well, I myself have quite a small wrist. It's
no way that's small. Mine is, look at that. Look.
And I always have troubles finding the right watch size. Well, no, I know the right watch size for me, which is around 35, 36 millimeter at most. And everything over that will look quite big on my wrist. And I don't like to have something flashy on me. But, that's, let's say, quite a problem because, for example, I cannot wear an Omega Speedmaster. I cannot wear the Bulgari Octo Finissimo, which is a watch I like immensely. And there are several iconic watches that I would like to wear, but are not for me, unfortunately.
yeah, they are like too big. But quite funny thing is that I have this this watch from Graham. It's called the Graham Chronofighter. Yeah, the like first thing first you will notice is the grenade like crown design, which is something I like. It's because like when I wear it, people are like, "Whoa, what the fuck is that?" Well, that's nice to know. But yeah, but this is like 42, 43 millimeters. It looks really chunky on my wrist. So you obviously you started a page on vintage watches, but how exactly did you first got into horology through vintage watches, or what's the story like what makes you like watches now?
It's almost hard to recall right now because it was quite a lot of time ago. I'd say it was around 2013 or 2014, so I was still very young. I was about 16, 17 years old, and I remember seeing an Instagram post from an Italian guy, which is not that famous. He has a good number of followers, but only from the Italian area. And he posts a lot about lifestyle, about wine, about sometimes watches. And I remember seeing this vintage Rolex DATEJUST on his wrist. And it was not the best or the most expensive, most luxurious watch from his collection, because he also has Yellow Gold Submariners, Daytonas, maybe even some Pateks.
Yes.
But what really caught my eye was the fact that it was a small, elegant watch, all in stainless steel, with a red date. And now I know that it was a roulette date disc, so it had black even numbers and red odd numbers, or the other way around. But at first I thought it had all red numbers, and this detail really caught my eye. So I said, okay, let's dive a little deeper into the world of watches. Let's see what all these things are about. And I went through the rabbit hole, and here I am 7 years later with an Instagram page discussing vintage watches.
Right. So it's like, can I say like your love for watches started with vintage watches, like with older archive pieces? Okay, that's really cool, because my first gateway entry, I feel like for a lot of people as well, is with my parents' watches. My dad gave me a Seiko, and at that time I was like, whoa, this is like heavy, it's like real, it's not like rubber Casio watch, it's real metal. And then the
first thing you notice about not necessarily precious watch, but about a well-made watch is how heavy it is.
Yes. I just love the way, and I was like, oh my god, this looks so good. It's automatic. What? It's not quartz. back then I didn't know shit about automatic watch. I was like, oh my god. And then I keep searching, and then, as you said, went down a rabbit hole, and now here I am having a podcast about watches and whiskey. So it takes a certain kind of passion to start a horology page, but it takes even more passion, I would say, to start a page on vintage watches. Because let's say I'm into fashion too. For me to talk about fashion, I feel like for everyone to talk about fashion is easy, because it's right there in front of you, whatever information you need. But for you to talk about archive fashion, like, oh, this brand 0203, they put out this, not a lot of people know that. Not only is it hard to find information about that, it's hard to find like an audience to actually be into what you're talking about. So what is it about vintage watches that intrigues you the most?
Well, I think that in a way, cataloging things is something that have always appealed to me, in a way. Collecting, but not for collecting's sake, but to be able to actually see the differences between different iterations of a single object, let's say. And that could be a coin, that could be a bill, that could be everything that can be compared. So when I approached the world of vintage watches, I really didn't know that much, of course, and I was that discerning about the different references of a single model, about the iteration of the dial, the hands, everything in a single reference. But then when I realized how much there was to know, to discover, to,
Yes.
in some cases, to even unearth, putting together information from books, from internet blogs, from sites.
Yes.
I found something that was even gratifying in a way, because something that I do quite a lot is going through all the auction catalogs, all the advertising and everything, trying to put together a complete image of the production of a particular reference.
Yes.
And when I get to the end of this process and I look at all the informations together, and I can say that I know quite a lot about a particular model, that is really satisfying. And what I like about this approach to the world of vintage watches is the fact that you don't need to be really, really wealthy or even say rich to get satisfied. I mean, some people,
yes.
when they approach the world of vintage watches, end up saying, okay, this is not for me, this is too expensive, I will never have $2,000 or $200,000 to spend on a watch. And that is sometimes discouraging. But, you know, having this approach, which is more like a scholar's approach, is maybe the right way to get into the matter. And what comes next, who knows? Maybe one day I will be able to actually afford all those watches. But for now, I'm really happy studying them and knowing them.
Yes, I'm not gonna lie, I love your approach to vintage watches, because at first when I first got into watches or horology, I didn't understand why people would love vintage watches. Okay. And the more I learn about the current market, the more I was like, dude, older watch designs are way cooler. Like, for some reason, they are just having fun in the 60s, in the 70s. But now,
Totally.
and now companies are just, because people love these, let's put out more. Omega, the 100th Speedmaster, they look the same, but people be like, oh my God, this is so cool. But if you look at, vintage Omegas, let's say, like a vintage Railmaster, awesome, great stuff. A vintage Seiko even, it's just great stuff. So I love that scholarly approach to watches, as you said just now. I love that. That's why now it's like, damn, now if I uncovered, let's say I'm browsing on auction, now I uncovered, a 1967 Longines or something like that. I was like, oh my God, it's so cool. No one know about this. Now I get to talk about it. So is it solely just the love of vintage watches that motivated you to start the page, or is there like a deeper motive behind this page, like you're trying to educate people instead of just sharing your ambition?
Well, in a way, yes. And of course, it is an ambitious goal. Well, I mean, you must have quite a lot of confidence, I would say, to think that you are able to educate people on any topic, and on vintage watches in particular. So at first, I wasn't that sure that I wanted to do that. And so was Lorenzo, who is the guy behind the page with me, who, by the way, couldn't be here today, but I'm bringing his salute. So hello from Lorenzo too.
What's his name? Sorry, what's his name?
Lorenzo.
Okay, Lorenzo, right.
Yes. And then we realized that when we started studying vintage watches, we had the possibility to find all in one place the information that we are able to share on our page. It would have been really, really easier for us. Maybe sometimes we also think that it would have not been that funny to get to this point, because a great part of the fun is in going through auction catalogs, books, websites, everything to put together information. But on the other hand, we realized that we had quite a lot of stuff to say and to share with people. So we figured out it was about time to create the page, and we felt confident that what we had to say could be the good thing to say, and that it would have not been too ambitious or arrogant to put out the page at the time.
Okay. Normally speaking, for you to produce one post, average, how long does it take?
It depends, really, because sometimes, we decide beforehand what we want to talk about. So we say, okay, this week we are talking about that particular 1965 Longines, Omega, or Vacheron, or whatever. So we gather information both from what we already have in our, let's say, archives, and additional information that we source time by time. And other times instead we just study a particular reference out of personal interest, and then we talk to each other and we say, okay, I have studied this particular reference this week, I have a lot of information, we might put out a post talking about the subject. So there is not a single process behind the creation of a post. And I would say that sometimes it takes only one afternoon of work, just putting together information we already have. And sometimes it's like a week before we are really sure about what to say, how to say that, how to write the caption, what pictures to use. There are several different things that go together into the creation of a post.
Piling onto what you said about, because it's more than just researching, it's about, designing the pose, where to put it, blah, blah. How much of the architectural element did you implement in designing the aesthetic you have for your Instagram page right now? So, okay, for those who are listening to this episode right now, if you go on to Vintage Watches Archive, the page, you can see it's really, I would say, minimalistic. It's just white, and then the watch, like, it's really easy to read. It's not a lot. It's not like overwhelming on the graphics. So in your opinion, the design process, how is it?
Well, a great architect who was Miss van der Rohe always said that less is more. So our approach to the page at first was, as you said, minimalistic, because we wanted it to be, let's say, some sort of a catalog. So someone could get to our page and just scroll through it until he reaches a particular watch that interests him. And with this format, he can see at first the watch, the maker, the reference, and say, okay, let's dig into this. Let's swipe through the pictures and see what this really is.
Right.
And we had to think quite a lot about how to set up the image of the page, the layout, in order to have something that could be brought on over time without the need for modifications, for additions, or without having to take off something if we realized there was too much. But I'd say we are quite satisfied with the result now.
I fucking love it. I love it because
Thank you.
One thing I struggle with my page sometimes is because I would say I have a lot of like ideas for like aesthetic for a page, but I am not the best at executing it. So I literally went through phases. I went through like try to be minimalistic, and then I found out it's not really my thing. And then I tried to add, as much graphic into it and see it. Now I love it. Like it's a process to find your style.
Of course, and not only in terms of an Instagram page, in terms of everything. It takes time to understand what you really like, and I also think it is okay to change your mind from time to time and evolve your taste, even in dramatic ways sometimes.
Yes, and that is one of the the most perfect advice for anyone out there. Like, let's say you started out liking aviation watch. Let's say you told your friends, oh, I love aviation watch, and now you don't like them at all. Don't be ashamed that you don't like it anymore. Like, literally no one cares. Like, don't be ashamed. Like, oh, I'm afraid to change. No, experiment.
Really,
and it's okay.
How the saying goes, only fools never change their mind. So
I'm gonna clip that. I'm gonna post it a snippet.
Nice.
Yes, only fools never change. That's really well said. And this coming question is a question that if I didn't get into vintage watches, I would have thought about it, because first of all, I'm not an econ major or business major. So from your knowledge, even though you're not involved, I would say you're not like involved in the vintage watch market, even though you are interested in it, it doesn't, you're not working in it. But I would say to a certain extent, you know what's going on. So from your knowledge, do you know which watch company is the most notorious or known for so-called artificial scarcity to jack up their vintage watch price?
I would have said until some months ago it was Rolex, because I thought too. There is this bubble pertaining modern steel Rolex watches that are really, really hard to find, even if you are a good client of an authorized dealer. But the voice that came to my ear is that Rolex actually is somehow even struggling to keep up with the pace of the request for their watches. They are too requested, so they cannot produce as much as people would like to buy. I don't know if this is true or not. On the other hand, I know for a fact that Patek Philippe wants to keep the number of their steel watches low, and not only in terms of production of a single reference, but also in terms of how many steel references they include in their catalog. If you browse through their catalog, you will realize that except for the sport lines, so the Aquanaut and the Nautilus, they only have one stainless steel Calatrava and very, very few steel watches from the Grand Complication and Complication lines. And that is a choice they made because even their heritage is mostly made of precious metal watches. So they want to keep true to their heritage and produce a limited number of stainless steel. Right. And of course, that if you think to it, that makes sense.
Yes.
Then the fact that people are willing to pay like 2 or 3 times the retail price for a brand new stainless steel Nautilus, of course, is a fact. I don't know what the approach of Patek Philippe to this is, but I know they are totally satisfied with their idea to keep production numbers low. And then what happens after, what happens on the gray market is basically none of their business.
Right. Now that you talk about that, I realized too, Patek Philippe had a lot of like white gold, platinum. So it's like they wouldn't, abandon the color silver, but they would use like white gold and platinum to replace steel. Yeah, that is true. Okay. Because I when I first heard about the artificial scarcity concept from someone he is a veteran at collecting vintage watch. I don't know if you followed him on Instagram. His name on Instagram is.
Yes, I know him. I follow him.
Right. If you follow him, his page is just there's 2,000, 3,000 vintage pieces. So, one time I was talking about one of the podcast episode, I named it the world's toughest sport is vintage watch collecting. Because there's so much to learn about it.
Yes,
there's almost no way for you to verify if it's like a legit piece or not. Right? And
of course,
yes.
The problem of verifying the authenticity of a watch depends from brand to brand, because some brands are really, really thoughtful about the matter, so they have publicly accessible archives, or are really okay with the fact of releasing an archival extract to validate a particular watch. And other companies, even big companies, do not want to get into the matter of discussing and validating their vintage pieces. And this sometimes is not because they are unable to do so, because let's get back to Rolex still as an example. They know what kind of dials they produced. They know which pieces did they install a particular dial on. So they might tell you if your watch is correct or not. On the other hand, for a certain period of time, there was a lot of confusion on the pairing of cases and service dials. So of course, through studying, you can try to put together a scheme to know whether a service dial is correct on a particular watch, if the dial was born as a service dial or it's just some pieces put together later by a dealer, by a collector. But yeah, Rolex will almost never tell you if you have a legit piece in your hands or not.
That's true. That reminded me of the famous vintage Rolex piece, the Rolex Blueberry dial, or right? And then I think it's like a rumor that there's no like authentic Blueberry dial, like, right? They always tell people that that's not, we didn't make that, right?
That is something, it's a question which I cannot answer, but not because I don't want to, but because I spoke to several influent collectors and I trust all of them immensely. One told me that they are totally legit, that there are also some fakes, but there are some that are original and originally came out from Rolex gates. And another one told me that all the blueberries are fake. So I really have no idea what to say on the matter.
Yeah, I have no idea either. And the reason why I even knew that's because I think it's the episode it's from Hodinkee. I think it's Ben Clymer talking with Daniel Day Kim or something like that. And he got that blue. Actually, now that I talk about Ben Clymer, you kind of look like Ben Clymer. What the hell? Like in a bit. In a bit.
It's something I've never heard before, but thank you.
Really? No. You low-key look like Ben Clymer a little bit. Oh, now that I talk about Ben Clymer, let's talk a little bit about Hodinkee. What's your take on the recent LVMH?
It's well, I think it's good for them.
Okay.
Of course, and I think it's a great validation and a great recognition of the work that Mr. Ben Clymer and the whole team put together in this, 11-12 year that Hodinkee has been around. Yeah. I would not be here today as a fan of vintage watches without Hodinkee, probably, because most of my early years I spent browsing through their pages, reading their articles, and watching their videos, which I like a lot. I have to say that maybe Hodinkee is not the site of reference for someone who wants to dig really deep into the world of vintage watches. But that, to me, makes total sense because they do not aim at reaching that really, really small niche of people who are into vintage watches at this level. They want to appeal people talking about vintage watches, of course, but modern watches on the other end, style, design. I like their format a lot, to be honest.
Yes.
And yeah, sometimes I've not found myself in total agreement with their statements, with their articles, but I find it to be a good site overall for what pertains the blog part.
Yeah, obviously. Yes, I agree with you that Hodinkee is not trying to reach the really niche part in the horology community, but they are like the first person you go to when you don't know, when you have a question about horology, because they are the gateway for a lot of people, even for veteran collectors, even for beginners. They are the first one you reach out to. And I love their, I feel like who doesn't? Like when you first got into watches, Hodinkee is like your thing. So I agree with you also where I love their style, their blog style, their content creating style. But I also kind of like slowly realize I don't quite align with what they have to talk about watches anymore. Not that they're wrong. It's that I just found my style or find my angle in looking at horology. So, but yes, I think the LVMH, they bought Hodinkee. LVMH buying Hodinkee is there's this the joke about people being scared. Oh shit, Hodinkee's gonna start praising Hublot. Oh my god, it's at the end of the world. But I think it's not a bad thing, to be honest. A lot of people hate Hublot. The more I learn about Hublot, is like it's not that bad. It's like
I mean, it's, if there is something that I try not to do is to take in an absolute position.
yes.
Because it's, as we said earlier, it's all a matter of taste. So if you value a watch in terms of investment, if you see watches as an asset, of course, Hublot is a terrible brand, and everyone knows that. But on the other hand, if someone likes what they do, if someone likes their approach to design, to horology, to marketing, then go for it. Buy it if it's what makes you happy. If you want to have that particular piece, there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah. And if people actually, because people are like accusing, like, oh my god, Hublot's like copying AP, Hublot's copying blah blah. But if you actually know that JCB worked at Hublot and AP simultaneously for a period of time, you will know, because it's the same designer and in the similar period. Of course, whatever's trending is going to be similar. So why are you?
Of course, and I mean, you might say the same to Omega, as they put out their current Seamaster line, which is quite reminiscent in some ways of the Rolex Submariner. But I never heard anyone saying Omega copied Rolex, while people say a lot that Hublot copies AP.
Yes. That's but to be honest, in the horology world, sorry, I feel like for quite some time now, from vintage watches, you can see a lot of duplicated designs. It's not because Longines decided to copy Tag Heuer or Omega decided to copy Tudor. It's just in the horology world, this is what's aesthetically pleasing. And to a lot, right? And to a lot of people, what actually matter is, even if you have the same design, okay, let's say Hublot and AP, you can tell which one's better from the production value. It's about the production value. It's not just about the look of it. It's about the production value, which cannot be copied at all.
Really? Yeah.
In any way. So from previous question, the question I asked about artificial scarcity, do you think if vintage watches are not as rare or not as archived, do you think the idea of, to me, a watch, the most important part of a watch, first of all, of course, is design. Second of all, it's the story behind it. That's why I wouldn't go buy a watch just because I feel like when I buy a watch, I want a story associated with it, so I feel more connected to it. So do you think the idea of story or sentiment value towards older timepieces is enough to fuel the vintage watch market?
Well, yes, on one hand, because if you think of it, there are some pieces. Let me bring an example, which is the two really famous chronographs, which would be the Patek 1463 and the Rolex Daytona, the hand-wound Daytona with a Paul Newman dial. And the Patek 1463 was produced in an estimate 700 to 750 pieces. So that is objectively rare. Because of these 700 or 750 pieces, around 300 are known to the market for having appeared in private hands or at public sale.
Right.
While the number of Paul Newman Daytonas is exponentially higher. But just the fact that the Paul Newman Daytona is associated with Paul Newman himself, Paul Newman the man, was enough to fuel the interest in that particular reference, which is now maybe the most sought after and the most famous reference from any maker in vintage watches. So yeah, I would say that scarcity might appeal a particular kind of collector, the collector who wants to have something objectively rare, maybe even unique. But many people, especially in recent times, want to buy a vintage watch not only for its intrinsic rarity, but for its aesthetics and for the style and the lifestyle idea associated to that particular watch. And well, if you think about it, like Philips made an auction recently, last year, which was called Styled, and paired vintage watches to outfits which maybe were prepared by the team at Mr. Porter or another
Mr.
brand,
Porter,
I don't
yes.
remember. So yeah, there is this idea, which I honestly like, of vintage watches being associated to a particular lifestyle or a particular fashion. So yeah, it's not only about rarity.
That's so true, because let's say a vintage watch that I really want to get my hands on right now, it's the Vulcan Cricket.
Okay, the presidential watch.
Yes, so like really popular vintage piece, of course. And the reason why I like it, or I see it as a worthy piece for me to acquire in the future, is because I think it will go well with a lot of my outfits. I think that's like the main element to determining, oh, should I buy this watch? Because I don't want to buy a watch and then I wear clothes and, oh shit, it doesn't go well. When am I going to wear this watch again?
I feel you.
So does that, how much does that, how important is that to you, like watch and outfit pairing?
I'd say quite a lot. Well, I don't have many watches right now. I own, I think, 6 watches. Well, I own a little more, but the ones that I wear on a regular basis are 6. Yes. And I often find myself thinking, okay, so today I'm wearing a pair of Red Wing boots and a Barbour, so I will use my diver. Or today I'm wearing a suit and tie, so let's use this particular watch. Watches for me are also a fundamental part of, let's say, my wardrobe, if it can be meant as part of the wardrobe.
Yes. And I want to ask you this question. So to me, in the current watch market, in the current horology community, the lines between, let's say, aviation watch, diving watch, dress watch, chronographs, whatever, sports watch, the lines between categories are blurring. So it's like blending together. Okay. So in my opinion, I don't want them to blend together, because if I let's not talk about functionality itself. If I buy a Submariner, I would expect this watch to go with more, as you said, a more rugged outfit with red wings, with an overshirt from Dickies or something like that, more rugged look. If I'm wearing a Cartier, I want to go with suits, turtleneck, a more sophisticated, elegant look. So when I buy a watch, I want a more a specific style associated with that watch, instead of every watch can go with everything. That's my point of view. So what do you think?
Yes, that's a good point of view. Of course, there are some, let's say, all-rounder watches. So if you own a ROLEX DATEJUST, I think that's the best example. Yes. You can wear it at the beach, you can wear it with a suit and tie, you can wear it for your wedding, whatever. And that's a piece that will never be out of place. But other watches, are totally associated with a particular outfit or with a particular moment of your day, of your life, a particular activity. Maybe, I would not say that the lines are really blurring between the different kinds of watches. What is blurring is the conception that these watches have to people. So if back in the 60s, you would walk into a Rolex dealer and say, okay, I am a saturation diver, so please give me the right watch for my activity. And you would have been given a Sea Dweller. Now, people would just walk into the dealer and say, okay, I like that watch, give me that watch, please. So, as you said, right now we are no more talking about the functionality of the watch. And the result of this approach to watches is the fact that people will wear any kind of watch in any situation. And I mean, I don't think that's necessarily bad, but I always try to keep a difference, at least based on what I'm wearing in that moment. Because of course I will never go saturation diving in my life, probably. But if I will have to wear a Rolex Sea Dweller, of course I will not wear it with a tuxedo, That's it.
Yes. And really funny story. So basically, I brought that discussion to Watch You Seek.
Okay.
Man, I have never seen such a toxic forum before. Even Reddit is better than Watch You Seek. So basically, I brought that discussion to their first comment, like just, oh, why do you care so much? Like, why don't you just buy? I was like, dude, it's a discussion, man. Like, if you don't like it, just scroll. Like, why are you coming at me? Like,
Yeah,
proposing
really.
Yeah, so funny. So what is something from the past models? So now that how long have you been involved with I'd say involved with vintage watches?
It's, well, vintage watches, let's say 5 or 6 years, more or
Okay.
less.
So I would say that you're quite experienced. So what is something from past models of any brands that you wish to see, being implemented more, or again bring it back in the retail market?
Well, what I like is the design of chronographs from the 40s and the 50s. So
Okay.
stainless steel or gold cases with round pushers, not too big in dimensions, two counters. I think that, for example, the Patek 1463 is one of the most beautiful chronographs ever created. Or all the Longines 13 ZN and many chronographs from that era have really great aesthetics. And I think that right now the chronograph market is a little bit too focused on innovative materials, modern lines. It's a little difficult to find an understated modern chronographs. There are, of course, exceptions, but this is my point of view. Also, I find that the lack of round pushers from most major brands is somehow, I don't know, annoying to me, because I'm not a fan of square pushers. I totally like round pushers.
Right. Because I would say for myself, one thing I want to see more is it's not even like a design or something like that. It's just bring gilt dial back, like more like popularized gilt dial.
Yes.
And maybe I forgot the name for the dial, but the point is because as I said just now, the retail market is more catered to what people want instead of watch company actually having fun designing watches, which I think they were actually having fun in, as you said, 40s to 70s or 80s. They're like, oh, let's put out a different style. Maybe people will like it. And maybe it didn't get a good result from it, but in my opinion, all these so-called different or weird designs are what made the vintage watch world so interesting. And that's why even till now, in the retail market, what draws my attention is, can you hear the construction noise?
No, not really.
Okay, it's like there's construction going on. What caught my attention are maybe the Montblanc 1858 Geosphere.
Yes.
Really gorgeous watch with uncommon dial design. Maybe something from Hermes, I forgot the full name, but Arceau de la Lune or something like that. Basically like two moons circling. So that's something I look for because it's special. Instead of just a Speedmaster, a Black Bay 36, everyone's wearing that. Why? What's so hype about it? Why is everyone jumping on a 2-year wait list for that?
Yes, I see your point. It's back in the days, what I like about the early production from Patek Philippe especially, which at this point I think is clear is my favorite brand, is that they used to put out several different iterations of a dial on any new reference they launched. So when you check vintage Patek Philippe production numbers, references, and movement numbers, you will realize that the earliest pieces are really, really different one from another. And then the production kind of focuses on particular styles which are put out in batches. So that's really easy to tell if a watch is all correct or not, if it's part of a particular batch or if it stands out from that batch. And right now, it's difficult to see a brand launch something totally new, even with different iteration. I would say that nobody does that nowadays, except for independents maybe. And that's because, of course, the production schemes changed entirely. So it's not something as artisanal as it was back in the days. It's a totally industrial process. So for a major brand like Rolex, like Omega, to say, okay, let's make 10 dials of this kind, 10 dials in this other version, 5 in another color, would be absurd in terms of costs of production.
And that I actually have another question I want to ask regarding the design of it. And I think, as you said, watch production went from artisanal to more industrial nowadays, because obviously more and more people want watches now, especially for that like status symbol. A Rolex, it was like, oh, I'm rich, look at my Rolex, can you see that? Look, like, right? So that for let's say watch lovers like you and I may start to, either put our focus on vintage watches and find different designs, or switch our focus on independent watchmaker or micro brands. And I can see that now a lot of micro brands, let's say Dan Henry, Baltic, Helios, they are making vintage watch design as like their gimmick. So what do you think about that? Like, what do you think about like remastering or republishing vintage watches, or reintroducing these kind of design into the market through micro brands? What's your thought on it?
It's I think it's all in all a good thing that this is happening, because it's also the reflection of the interest of people. So I find it nice that there are brands who are really listening to what enthusiasts want, and not only what, let's say, common people want. As you said, Rolex is now mainly addressing people who want to exhibit a watch as a status symbol.
Yes.
And they are somehow maybe letting down enthusiasts who would like something more, I wouldn't say faithful to the origins, because the evolution of Rolex watches is totally faithful to what they used to be.
Yeah, they didn't change at all, I would say.
Exactly. They put out those small changes that sometimes are even impossible to notice, but are always focused to making a piece more contemporary and also more reliable, which is good. It's totally good in a way. But enthusiasts who would like something more emotional, more romantic, are totally let down by this approach to production. So I think that micro brands offering the collecting community what they want is a good thing. What is not always good is the fact that they will sometimes overprice cheap movements and cheap components only because they are packed in a good final design. And of course, if people buy their watches, that pays them off, and that's okay. But as also a person who is focusing a lot on the technical aspect of the watch, I don't like them all. I have to choose to differentiate.
Yeah, definitely. I don't like them all. That's the same thing, and that is so true. I got another question for you. Sorry, I got so many questions out of nowhere.
No problem.
So my friend Gareth, in the last episode where we talked about micro brands and the good and bad of it, so he asked, do you think if collectors, let's say collectors in horology world, disappeared, like you and I, that actually have the appreciation for micro brands disappeared, do you think micro brands will exist still?
I don't know, but this is mainly because of how they advertise and distribute their pieces. Because if you think about it, micro brands are mostly focused on selling online, while I could go out any day of the week here in Milan or in any other city, walk into a retailer, a jeweler, and get a watch from a major brand. So probably if as enthusiasts would disappear, there would not be enough people searching for like vintage inspired timepiece on the internet to find out about micro brands.
Yes,
That's
that's so
core of
true.
the matter, I think.
That's so true. Yeah, I don't think so either. I said that they would totally disappear because even for myself, I've only discovered all these micro brands like few months ago, but I've been liking watches for like almost 2 years now.
Mm-hmm.
So, right. So even for myself, I didn't know they existed until I started doing more like vintage watch related content. So yes. Okay. Bonus round. Okay. It's not, these are like quick rapid fire questions. This or that. Okay. Vintage Patek or modern Patek?
Vintage.
Vintage. Okay. Vintage Tag Heuer or vintage Longines?
If by vintage Tag Heuer you refer to before they became Tag Heuer, so also the Heuer.
Oh yeah, Heuer. Okay, yeah, Heuer.
Okay, I would say Heuer.
Heuer. Okay.
Yeah, Heuer.
I would go with Longines. I would. I would go with Longines because I love their hour angle.
Okay. Yes.
The
that's
Lindbergh.
a really cool watch. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I also just learned that they had a watch. It's called the Cristobal C or something like that. You can lift.
Yes, I remember that it was made. I don't remember exactly when, but I've heard about that. It's I'm not a big expert on Longines, I have to admit.
Yeah.
But I remember hearing about that one.
Yeah, it was so cool because it's like a sun compass, so you can align lift it.
Okay, I have it right now. Okay, with the hours engraved on the bezel, so you could use it as an actual sundial by orientating it.
Yeah, you can lift the bezel up to align the shadow with. That's so cool. I just learned about that and I was like, holy shit, if the watch world would put out something like this now, I think a lot of people would go like crazy on it. Even just vintage watch lovers, or they would go crazy on it. Okay, one last question. I think this one's the toughest for me, I think. Vintage Rolex or vintage Seiko?
I think I will say vintage Rolex because of what Rolex represented for the watch world at large.
Okay.
So like the first full rotor automatic movement, the first waterproof case, it has to be Rolex. Because we would not have modern watches without Rolex, probably.
That's true. And I would pick vintage Seiko because I just think for myself, Seiko had a lot of different designs for me to choose from. But one thing I love the most about Rolex, which I also talked about in an episode where I try to understand vintage Rolex, is for weird reasons. I mean, not for weird reasons. Rolex used to be known as the most reliable watchmaker out there, right? They're so sturdy, functionality is great, right? So that in turns made a lot of prominent figures and public figures buy Rolexes. Let's say even Che Guevara wore a GMT, a Queen of England wore Rolex. A lot of these world record breakers wore Rolex. So that in turns made Rolex like the
Rolex
brand.
Was probably the first watchmaker to advertise his pieces through the, let's say, help of famous people.
Celebrity, yes.
Yeah, through
and that helped a
celebrities,
lot.
by giving their watches to celebrities. And, there's a story about Sir Jackie Stewart, the Formula One pilot, who has been a long time Rolex ambassador. And at one point of his career, he would even ask his tailor to make his left sleeve on the shirts a little bit shorter, so his Rolex watch would pop out, at events.
Whoa, what the okay, that's so cool. Damn. Okay. See, like Rolex is like used to be the king of marketing. They're so effortless about it, but because they are so confident in their products, like, just wear it. People will know.
Exactly.
It's so nice. So is there anything else you want to talk about your page?
Well, let me think about it. Yeah, we have some new series incoming. One
Yes.
just started, and is the one about enamel artists, because we felt like people who master the art of enameling dials and
Yes.
other parts of the watches really deserve some recognition from the wide public, let's say. There
Yeah.
are many enthusiasts of the matter, and we knew that by making our research for the series, but there is still a lot of light to shed on these artists. And what I
Okay.
incredibly like is the fact that they are able to reproduce on a metal disc, which is like 2.5 centimeters in diameter, the most beautiful and most famous artworks from the history of humanity. And that
Damn.
I find
Okay.
incredibly amazing.
Okay, so that's an upcoming series on Vintage Watches archive page.
And also there is another one about which we are really excited. I don't want to share more details right now, but it will pertain to vintage watch design and the people who created it.
Oh,
Not necessarily as jewel designers. So you will know more about that really soon.
Okay, stay tuned, guys. Stay tuned. Whoever's not following them, go follow now. If you're listening to this, go follow them. Vintage Watches Archive. I'm gonna link everything down in the description, or when I publish this episode, I'm gonna link everything in my story, Instagram. You're gonna click it. Just go give this page a follow. They are I'd say they're super knowledgeable on the post they put out. You can learn a lot about the watches they talk about. You will. So I can guarantee you. I mean, whoever's listening to this right now, a lot of pages out there bullshit their way through their whole career. Like they pretend that like they know shit, but they actually don't, and they would want the public to think like that. But this page is not. Okay, I guarantee you this page, they do their fucking homework.
What to say? Thank you for the shout out. Thank you for the kind words. I really appreciate them.
Yeah, I enjoyed the conversation we had today. See, here's what I love about podcast episodes like these is it's not like I ask you a question, answer, done. I asked you a question, answer, done. Like we actually had a conversation going. And I learned a lot about Patek Philippe today. Holy shit. And that tiny little fun fact about Rolex. So thank you once again. Your name is Alvise, right? Am I
it's pronounced Alvise, but I've learned through the years that it's really difficult to have it pronounced correctly, even in some parts of Italy. So don't worry.
Is Alvise?
Alvise, yes, exactly.
Alvise. Okay. Alvise. I'm so sorry, I butchered your name.
No problem at all.
So thank you so much once again, Alvise Mori.
Thank you, Ryan, for having me.
Thank you. Would love to have you on the podcast once again, maybe next year. So
okay, so let's catch up and see
with Lorenzo. Would love to have him on the podcast as well. So once again, go follow them, check their stuff out. And this is Ryan. Thank you for staying here with us today, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye, guys.